After you've completed your research, you'll need to write a hypothesis. So a hypothesis is what you feel will work best, so what you're trying to prove or disprove. So I'm going to write a pretend hypothesis based on my research that I've carried out here. So I said, I believe the best fat to use to make a basic biscuit is butter. So this is because butter will produce a biscuit with good colour, flavour and texture. So that is my hypothesis based on the research that I've carried out. So my research has actually suggested that butter would be best, and most of the recipes I looked at used butter, mainly for flavour, but also for its shortening properties and the plasticity of it, so it will soften when you're mixing the other ingredients in. If you've written your hypothesis, you can then actually start planning your investigation. So I would always start with an aim. So my aim is to investigate which fat makes the best biscuit. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to work out. So I start by using my non-bias codes. So they're the codes that the taster won't actually know what product they're tasting, so they're not biased towards their opinion. So I've just got symbols here for my non-bias codes. I could use A, B, C, D, and this is mentioned later on in the video. So the first one here is going to be my control sample. So that is butter. So I'm going to have 4 variables for this experiment, and so I'm going to compare that to other fats that I found in my research would still make a biscuit, to see if actually butter does make the best quality biscuit. So the next one is going to be block margarine. It's similar in quality, as we mentioned earlier, to butter. Then we're going to use some soft margarine, which is often suitable for baking. And then we're going to have actually go something a little bit different, and we're going to use Trex, which is a vegetarian alternative to margarine and lard. So there are all our variables. And we've mentioned the fact that we've coded those up with non-bias codes. So I just wanted to explain the fats that we've chosen to use for this experiment. So firstly, we've got butter. So butter is the control. That is the one that our hypothesis suggests that will actually make the best biscuit from my research looking at the control recipe. So butter is an animal fat. It's a saturated fat. Its plasticity means that it's solid at room temperature. It's got really good shortening properties and coats the gluten in the flour to produce a short biscuit. So we're expecting a relatively good quality biscuit from using the butter. And you can see it's at room temperature now, and it's still quite hard. So to work with that, it's going to take quite a lot of creaming the mixture. I could soften it slightly in the microwave before I actually work with it, will make it easier, but I must be careful to only put it in very short time because I don't want it to go runny. So the second fat we're going to be using is margarine. So the difference here is margarine is vegetable based, so it's an unsaturated fat, that's been treated, hydrogenated, in order to make it the oil set and form the structure of a margarine. Not all margarines are purely oil-based. Some do have milk in, so they do have dairy products in, but this is a cooking margarine which has come from vegetable oil. Really suitable for baking. Will have very similar properties to butter. So its shortening and plasticity is similar, but I think it will soften a little bit easier than the butter. You can see the spoon's going through it a little bit more. So that's going to be easier to mix, which is why it's often used in baking. So the next one we've got is a soft margarine. So soft margarine is made from vegetable oils and water, and it's the water that makes it softer than the block margarine. Really suitable for baking, particularly cakes. It's an unsaturated fat. It will have similar shortening properties and plasticity, but it's a lot softer, so we might find a different texture. We also might find a different texture with that because of the water content of it. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects the biscuit. Finally, we've got the Trex. So Trex is a vegan product. It's an alternative that people can use for baking. Very good shortening properties. So it coats the gluten in the flour, breaks down the gluten into short strands, which means you should get a very crisp biscuit from using shortening. You can see the colour is very different, so this is going to impact on the colour compared to the other three, where you would expect maybe the colour to be similar. It's made from vegetable oil Trexes, which has been chilled down and processed to form a solid mixture like this. Plasticity is quite soft, so you can see that's going to mix really, really easily. Now, on my research, I found out that you would ordinarily use less Trex, 20% less in the recipe. We're not, because we're going with the standard recipe, so we're going to use the full amount of Trex in this recipe, so we may find that affects the quality of that particular biscuit, so it will be interesting to see. So I thought it was important you understood the working characteristics of those fats before we move forward and cook with them in the experiment. On a few occasions I've mentioned the term fair test, so we want to be sure that the only change in the recipe that we're making is the fat and the butter. So some of the things that we'll need to do here is use the same basic recipe. So that's going to mean the same quantities of ingredients. If we vary those, it may be the quantities that is causing the difference in the quality of the biscuit, not the actual fats, only the fat that we want to look at. Same oven temperature, or same method, we'll say the same method of making. You need to use the same oven, ideally the same shelf. Cook them for the same, so time also needs to be the same for them. The oven temperature needs to remain constant for all the samples. So we need to look at having them the same size as well, and shape. It's always best to have the same person, same chef stroke cook, because we all know we have different abilities of chefs and cooks, so it's the same person handling them. And they need to be done really within the same time limit.